Behind my back, she emptied our entire life savings into her secret lover's hands, leaving her own dying mother paralyzed while framing me for the very financial crime she committed.
She's nearly 70. Saving her is just a waste of money, and you're not touching a single dime of our joint savings. Verity took a slow sip of her wine, spitting the words into her phone with that same cold disgust she used to dismiss everything I said. She had no idea my landline speaker was turned all the way up, or that her own father was on the other end of the line, weeping, hearing every brutal word from his daughter's mouth. My mother-in-law was clinging to life after a horrific accident, while 12 years of our hard-earned savings were completely gone, secretly drained to buy a luxury condo for her lover. Worse, they'd framed me, planting fake receipts to send me to federal prison for embezzling the school's lunch fund. How do you fight back when your honor, your family, and a loved one's life are backed into a corner? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Hit subscribe to see how I face this nightmare, and let me know in the comments below. The wind off Lake Superior didn't just blow through Duluth, it rattled the old brick bones of Pinecrest Academy. I sat at my metal desk, the green shaded lamp casting a weak pool of light over the stack of November invoices from McLean Catering. Outside the frost-rimed window, the blizzard was erasing the harbour, turning the towering coal docks into pale, ghostly shapes. I rubbed my eyes, the glare of the spreadsheet burning my retinas. I've spent 15 years staring at ledger lines for this school, keeping track of every penny meant for the kids of dock workers and grain handlers. It was honest, quiet work. I liked the order of it. Numbers don't lie. They don't try to look you in the eye and pretend they're something they're not. But the invoices in front of me didn't make sense. The unit price for bulk potatoes and whole milk had climbed 40% since September. Rory McLean had been our food contractor for 3 years, and his margins had always been tight. Now, they were bleeding the lunch fund dry. My cell phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against a wooden ruler. The screen showed Verity's name. I took a slow breath, bracing myself, and slid the bar to answer. "Hey, Verity. I'm just wrapping up the weekly reconciliation. Dashiell, did you call the broker about the Florida rental yet?" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the office radiator. "No," I said quietly. "I told you, Verity. We don't have the room in the budget this month. The heating oil bill for our building went up. And nothing," she snapped, cutting me off. "I can't take another winter in this frozen hole, Dashiell. Everyone at the tennis club is going down to Sarasota. Everyone. And here I am, stuck in a drafty apartment while you count pennies for a bunch of charity cases. They're not charity cases, Verity. They're school kids. Whatever. You know, if you'd just let me sell that old platinum ring of your mother's, we'd have the deposit. It's just sitting in your drawer gathering dust. It's not like she's using it." I looked at the small silver band on my left hand, then down at the invoices. The platinum ring was the last thing my mother gave me before the cancer took her. "We're not selling the ring, Verity. We agreed on that." "No, you agreed," she spat. "You always do this. You keep us living like peasants because of your ridiculous sentimentality. Just whatever. I'm going out. Don't expect me to leave any dinner in the fridge." She hung up before I could answer. The dial tone on my cell was a dry, hollow scratch. I stared at the phone for a long second, then set it down. 12 years of marriage, and lately, every conversation felt like stepping on broken glass. Before I could even put the phone back on its cradle, the old black landline on my desk let out a loud, jarring ring. It was the school's direct emergency line. "Pinecrest Academy, Dashiell Croft speaking." "Dash? Oh God, Dash." The voice was ragged, gasping for air between wet, heavy sobs. It took me a second to recognize my father-in-law, Gideon. He was 70, a retired shipyard welder who had spent his life working with steel. I'd never heard him raise his voice, let alone cry. "Gideon? What's wrong? What happened?" "It's Maeve," he choked out, the words coming through a rush of static. She went out to clear the black ice off the back steps. She slipped, She went down hard, hit her head on the concrete. She's not moving, There's so much blood. My heart slammed against my ribs. Maeve. The only person in that family who had ever looked at me like I belonged. The woman who brought me hot soup when I had the flu, who treated me like her own son from the day Verity brought me home. Gideon, listen to me, I said, my voice rising as I stood up, knocking a stack of papers to the floor. Did you call the ambulance? They're on their way, he stammered, his voice trembling with a terrifying, childlike panic. They're taking her to Duluth General. But the dispatcher, she said, the roads are bad. The storm is locking down the city. They said, they need a specialist on standby for her spine. They're talking about an emergency decompression surgery. They need a $35,000 deposit up front because our insurance doesn't cover this out-of-network specialist. I don't have that kind of cash, My account is empty. We have it, Gideon, I said, my hand shaking as I grabbed my cell phone. We have the $150,000 in our joint savings. I'll call Verity right now. We'll meet you at the hospital with the wire transfer. Please, hurry. Her eyes are open, but she isn't looking at me. I didn't hang up the landline. I pressed the speaker button, letting Gideon's heavy, panicked breathing fill the quiet office. With my left hand, I dialed Verity's number on my cell. She answered on the second ring, the background noise loud with the clinking of glasses and laughter. She was probably at the hotel bar near the harbour. What now, Dashiell? I told you, I'm out with friends. Verity, listen to me, I said, keeping my voice level, though my throat felt like it was full of sand. I just got a call. There's been a terrible accident. An accident? Who? Mom, I said, deliberately leaving the name out. She slipped on the ice. She's at Duluth General right now. She's got a severe brain injury, and they're saying her spine is crushed. They need to do an emergency decompression surgery to keep her from being paralyzed. There was a sudden pause on the line. The background noise seemed to quiet down as she stepped away from her friends. What? She breathed. They need $35,000 up front for the out-of-network specialist to do the surgery, I said, my eyes locked on the landline speaker where Gideon was listening. I need you to log into our joint account right now and wire the money to the hospital's billing office. It's an emergency, Verity. Every minute counts. Are you out of your mind? Her voice suddenly turned sharp, losing all of its shock, replaced by a cold, venomous hiss that made my blood run cold. $35,000? For that? Dashiell. She's nearly 70 years old. Saving her is just a waste of money. She's lived her life. I'm not letting you throw away our entire future on some useless surgery for an old woman who's probably going to die on the table anyway. Verity, she's dying, I whispered, my knuckles turning white around the cell phone. I don't care, she snapped. You are not touching a single dime of our savings for this. I've worked too hard to let you ruin our chances of getting out of this miserable city. Tell the doctors to do what they can, but the savings stay where they are. Don't you dare touch that account, Dashiell. I mean it. I reached down and pressed the volume button on the landline speaker, turning it all the way up. The metal casing of the phone rattled with the sudden volume. Gideon's voice came through the speaker, no longer crying. It was a low, terrifying growl that sounded like tearing metal. Verity, you monster! The line on my cell went dead silent. I could hear Verity's sharp gasp over the air, the sound of her breath catching in her throat. Dad? She whispered, her voice suddenly thin, cracking with a frantic, desperate panic. Dad, is that you? You monster! Gideon roared, his voice shaking with a lifetime of broken trust. That is your own mother. The emergency room waiting area at Duluth General smelled of industrial bleach and melting slush. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed a low, sickening B-flat. Verity was pacing in front of the vending machines, her high heels squeaking against the wet tile. Her fingers were flying across her phone screen, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "It's not loading," she muttered, her voice rising in pitch. "Why the hell is it not loading? Dashiell, did you lock me out of the account? Is this some sick joke? I didn't look up from my hands. They were cold, the skin around my cuticles dry and cracked from the winter air. I didn't lock anything, Verity," I said. "The account is open, but there's nothing in it to load." She stopped pacing. She stared at me, her eyes wide, the blue makeup around her lids slightly smudged. "What do you mean, nothing? We have $150,000 in there. We've been putting money in that account for 12 years. Go check the transaction history," I said, my voice flat. "It's all on your side." Gideon sat in the plastic chair next to me, his heavy, grease-stained welder's hands resting on his knees. He hadn't looked at Verity since we arrived. He was staring at a brown stain on the linoleum floor, his jaw set so tight. The bone looked like it was about to burst through his weathered skin. "Verity," Gideon said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that seemed to shake the cheap plastic chairs. "Where is the money?" "The surgeon. He won't even scrub in until he gets the $35,000 deposit. Your mother, she's lying in there with a crushed neck, Verity." "Where is it?" Verity's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against the floor. She didn't pick it up. Her face went the color of the dirty snow outside the window. I invested it," she stammered, her eyes darting between me and her father. "It was a sure thing, Dad," Rory said. "Rory said the real estate market near Lake Superior was about to explode. He found this luxury condo. We bought it under his company name to avoid the retail taxes. We were going to flip it in March and double our money. I was going to put it back before you noticed, Dashiell. I swear." Gideon slowly stood up. He was 70, but he still had the shoulders of a man who worked the shipyards. He stepped into Verity's space, his shadow completely swallowing her. "You gave our life savings, your mother's life savings, to that grease monkey caterer?" "It was a joint venture," Verity cried, her voice echoing off the concrete walls, drawing looks from the nurse's station. "We were trying to get out of this dump, Dad. Dashiell was never going to get us out. He's a school accountant. He's happy living in a drafty apartment eating canned beans. I wanted more. I wanted a real life. Your mother's life was in that account," Gideon said, his voice deadly quiet, "and you traded it for a piece of glass by the lake." The double doors to the trauma ward swung open. The specialist, a tired-looking man with grey hair and surgical scrubs, pulled down his mask. He didn't look at Verity. He looked straight at Gideon and me. "Are we cleared on the specialist deposit?" he asked. "We're 6 hours past the golden window for decompression, the swelling in the cervical vertebrae." "The account is empty, Doc," I said. My throat felt like it was coated in ash. "We don't have the cash." The doctor's shoulders slumped. He let out a long, slow sigh, his eyes dropping to the floor. "We had to use the on-call trauma resident to stabilize her," he said softly. "We did what we could, Gideon. But the pressure on the spinal cord was too high for too long. The damage is permanent. She's not going to walk again." The silence that followed was heavier than the blizzard outside. Gideon didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just turned around, pushed open the heavy doors, and walked into his wife's room, leaving us in the sterile, buzzing light. Verity took a step toward the doors, but stopped. She turned on me, her teeth bared, her face twisted in a desperate, ugly mask of self-justification. "This is on you, Dashiell," she hissed, her fingers clawing at my jacket. "If you hadn't been so stubborn about that damn platinum ring, if you had just sold it when I asked, we would have had the cash. You did this. You let my mother get paralyzed because of your stupid pride." I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her. 12 years of marriage, and I was looking at a complete stranger with a rotten heart. I turned my back on her and walked out into the snow. By 3 in the afternoon, I was back at Pinecrest Academy. The school was empty. The kids sent home early because of the storm. The only sound was the wind rattling the old double-hung windows and the low clanking of the steam pipes. I sat at my desk, my coat still on, my boots dripping a puddle of grey water onto the floor. I had the McLean Catering ledger open. Now that I knew about the condo, the numbers on the page didn't look like inflation anymore. They looked like a heist. Rory McLean had been billing the school for organic whole milk at $5 a gallon. But the delivery slips from the warehouse showed they were receiving cheap, powdered skim milk. He was pocketing the 40% difference. Over 6 months, it added up to exactly $120,000. The ledger didn't lie, but I'd been blind. I'd trusted Verity when she entered the electronic clearances from home. I'd let her handle the school's digital portal because I trusted her. The office door swung open with a loud creak. Arthur Henderson, the school principal, stepped in. His face was grim, his eyes avoiding mine. Behind him was a local Duluth police officer, his yellow badge gleaming on his dark blue coat, and behind them both stood Rory McLean. Rory was wearing a tailored wool coat that smelled of expensive cologne and damp snow. He had a look of quiet, respectful concern on his face, the kind of look a man wears at a funeral he didn't want to attend. "Dashiell," Henderson said, his voice tight, "I need you to step away from the desk." I stayed right where I was, my hands resting flat on the ledger. "What's going on, Arthur?" "We had a notification from the school board's audit committee this morning," Henderson said, stepping closer. "They ran a routine digital sweep on our food service accounts. There's $120,000 missing from the student lunch fund. The transfers were cleared through your account." "I'm looking at the catering billing right now, Arthur," I said, pointing at the open page. "Rory's been inflating the unit prices by 40%. He's the one who took the money." Rory took a step forward, shaking his head, his voice filled with a smooth, practiced disappointment. "Come on, Dash. Let's not do this. I've been running an honest business for 10 years. You're the one who cleared those payments through the school portal. You told me it was a special state subsidy for the winter program. I just delivered the food you ordered." "I never signed off on those electronic clearances, Rory," I said, my voice rising just a bit, "and you know it. The signatures on the digital portal are all yours, Dash," Rory said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a heavy manila folder. He shoved it onto the desk, right over my ledger. The police officer stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. "Mr. Croft," the officer said, "we've already run a preliminary check with the State Financial Crimes Unit. They traced the secondary transactions from McLean Catering's account." Rory smiled, a tiny, cruel twitch of his lips that Henderson couldn't see. He leaned over the desk, tapping the top of the folder with his leather-gloved finger. "The police already ran the trace, Dash. Your private personal account at Northern Trust received exactly $120,000 from my company's clearinghouse yesterday. Here's the receipt with your name on it. 48 hours, Dash," Alistair said, leaning against the door of his unmarked sedan. He didn't look at me. He was watching the snow swirl under the street lamp, his collar turned up against the Duluth wind. "That's all the breathing room I could buy you. The school board is screaming for blood, and the DA wants a slam-dunk embezzlement case before the holiday recess. If you don't find something to clear your name by Thursday morning, I have to sign the warrant myself." "I just need the raw logs, Al," I said, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. "Rory's smart, but he's sloppy. He thinks deleting a spreadsheet is like burning a piece of paper. You're barred from Pinecrest property, Dash. If the night guard catches you in that building, it's a breaking and entering charge. I won't be able to pull you out of that one. I'll be quick." I turned and walked before he could give me another reason to stay in the car. At 2:00 a.m., the school looked like an old, abandoned factory. The brick walls were black against the white snowshoe, and the playground swings creaked in the wind off the lake. I slipped through the shadows of the gymnasium wall, my boots crunching softly on the hard crust of the ice. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I've spent my whole life keeping things in order, following the rules, filing every form in triplicate. Sneaking into my own office felt like a dirty coat I didn't want to wear. A side door near the boiler room clicked open. Just a crack. Silas's weathered face appeared in the gap. He was 65, with a bad hip and a permanent scent of floor wax and tobacco. He looked at me, then down at the snow, before stepping back to let me slide past. "You've got 20 minutes, Dash," Silas whispered, his voice dry as paper. "The security company runs a remote check on the main panel at 2:30. If they see any motion sensors tripping in the admin wing, they'll dispatch a cruiser." "Thanks, Silas. I won't touch anything I don't have to." "I know you didn't take that money, son," he said, touching my shoulder with a heavy, calloused hand. "Those kids, they need those lunches. You wouldn't steal from them." "I'm going to prove it," I said. I moved through the dark hallways, the silence of the school heavy and thick. I bypassed my own office. Rory and the auditors would have locked that down, and any login on my desktop would trigger a system flag. Instead, I headed for the server room, a converted supply closet behind the computer lab. The air inside was warm and smelled of hot plastic and ozone. Rows of green and blue LED lights flickered on the black metal rack, casting jumping shadows on the wall. I pulled out the keyboard drawer of the master console, my fingers cold as I touched the keys. My login was disabled. I knew it would be. But as the lead accountant, I had the backdoor network key we used for the annual independent audits. I typed the 60-character override string from memory. The screen flickered. The system accepted it. I didn't waste time on the active database. Rory had wiped the catering files clean before the police arrived, leaving only his forged receipts. But Rory didn't know how Microsoft Excel really works on a shared network. Every time a user opens a spreadsheet on the Pinecrest server, the system creates a ghost, a tiny temporary backup file in the local app data folder. It's a safety net for when the power dies or the network crashes. I opened the command prompt and ran a deep search for any file ending in GEMP or starting with the hidden prefix. A long list of system files began scrolling down the screen. My eyes strained against the green glow, scanning the paths. There, app data local, temp, Maclean Nov invoice. Prep. I clicked on the file properties, my breath catching in my throat. The metadata window popped open. File created, November 12, 2025, 11:42 p.m. Last modified by D. Croft. Authorizing IP, 192.168.115. I stared at the IP address, my home router. On November 12th, I wasn't at home. I was 60 miles away in Grand Rapids, sitting in a budget motel room, doing a late-night audit for the regional high school. I didn't have my work laptop with me. But Verity was at home. She had her iPad. She had my login credentials saved on the shared family password keychain. I checked the next file. November 18th, 1:15 a.m. Authorizing IP, 192.168.115. That was the night of our anniversary dinner. We'd had a massive fight, because I'd forgotten to book the expensive restaurant she wanted. She'd locked herself in the guest room at 10 o'clock. I had fallen asleep on the couch downstairs, listening to the wind howl. She had approved the 40% price hike from her bed, while I slept 10 feet below her. I felt a cold, sick hollow open up in my stomach. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. She had looked me in the eye every morning, poured my coffee, watched me stress over the school's tightening budget, all while she was quietly siphoning the children's lunch money into Rory's bank account to pay for their secret lakeside nest. "Why, Verity?" I whispered into the dark room. I pulled a black USB drive from my pocket and jammed it into the server port. I started copying the raw temporary files, the metadata, the IP routing logs, the digital signature tags. The progress bar crept across the screen. 15%, 30%. Suddenly, a heavy, metallic thud echoed from the hallway outside. I froze. My hand hovered over the keyboard. It wasn't Silas. Silas walked with a slow, dragging limp. These footsteps were fast, heavy, and purposeful. The squeak of rubber soles against the linoleum. I leaned my head close to the door. Crack, my eyes straining to see through the darkness of the computer lab. A flashlight beam bounced across the rows of monitors, drawing closer. "Silas?" a voice called out. It wasn't Silas's voice. It was young, sharp, and impatient. One of the private security patrollers. "You back here?" I turned back to the console. The progress bar was at 60%. Come on, I thought, my heart hammering against my chest. Just a few more seconds. Suddenly, the monitor screen went black. A single line of red text flashed in the center. "Session terminated. Admin lockout by master control." My blood ran cold. Someone had cut my access from the main administrative terminal in the front office. Before I could even pull the USB drive out, a sharp, metallic click echoed from the ceiling. The ventilation fan hummed down and died, leaving the room dead silent. Then, a deafening, high-pitched scream tore through the quiet. The building's fire alarm. Red strobe lights began flashing on the walls, blinding me in the dark. A thick, acrid smell of burning plastic started pouring through the overhead vents. Someone had shut down the exhaust fans and triggered the master alarm from the main panel. "He's in here!" The security guard shouted from the computer lab, his flashlight beam swinging directly toward the server room door. "I've got a break-in!" I grabbed the USB drive, shoved it into my pocket, and looked at the single, narrow window behind the server rack. The plastic smoke in the server room was thick, tasting like burnt wire and copper. The red strobe lights were flashing, cutting through the haze in jagged pulses. I could hear the security guard's boots squeaking on the linoleum in the computer lab just outside. "Hey, who's in there?" he yelled, his voice muffled by the heavy door. I didn't answer. I grabbed the heavy brass fire hammer hanging by the server rack, swung it hard, and shattered the small, wire-reinforced window of the emergency exit. Cold, biting Duluth air rushed in, clearing the smoke for a brief second. I threw my legs over the sill, my winter coat catching on a jagged piece of glass, and tumbled out into the deep, frozen snow. I lay there for a second, the cold biting through my jeans, before pushing myself up. My chest was burning. I patted my pocket. The USB drive was still there. I slipped into the dark alley, my boots sinking into the fresh drift, leaving the screaming sirens behind. Al's office at the Duluth PD was quiet, smelling of old radiator steam and wet floor mats. Alistair Burke was sitting with his elbows on his desk, his eyes bloodshot. Beside him, Nola, his digital analyst, was tapping away on a laptop, her face illuminated by the blue screen. I slid the USB drive onto the desk. "That's the registry logs from the temporary app data files," I said, my voice hoarse. Nola grabbed the drive, plugged it in, and let out a soft whistle. "You actually pulled the temp files. Nice work, Dash." She clicked through the directories, her eyes scanning the lines of code. "Here it is, November 12th. The invoice was approved at 11:42 p.m. The approving IP is registered to a residential account, 192.168.115. That's your home router, Dash." "I was in Grand Rapids that night," I said, "doing the district audit. I checked into the Motel 6 at 8. "And the MAC address of the device?" Alistair asked, leaning forward. Nola typed a few commands. "It's an iPad Pro. Serial number matches the one registered to Verity Croft." Alistair looked at me. There was no pity in his eyes, just the cold, hard reality of a cop who'd seen too many families rip each other apart. "It's a start, Dash," Alistair said. "But a defense lawyer will just argue she logged in to help her busy husband. We need a direct line to Rory McLean's money. Right now, on paper, you're still the one with 120 grand in a secondary account." My phone buzzed on the corner of Alistair's desk. It was Gideon, I answered, putting him on speaker. "Dash." His voice was shaking, but there was a hard, dangerous edge to it. "I'm at my place. Verity left her old documents safe here last year when we were painting her bedroom. I broke the latch, Dash." "What did you find?" "Gideon, a mortgage contract," he said, letting out a shaky breath, From 3 days ago, Rory McLean took out a $200,000 mortgage on that lakefront condo, the one Verity bought with your savings. Alistair snapped his fingers at Nola. Run the title on that property now. Nola's fingers blurred over the keyboard. Got it. The condo at 1040 Lakeview Drive. Registered owner is McLean Holdings LLC. But there's a fresh lien on it. 200 grand cash-out mortgage approved Tuesday. Why would he mortgage the place if they just bought it? I asked. Alistair took the phone from my hand. Gideon, it's Alistair. Stay there. Don't touch anything else. We're on our way. He hung up and turned to Nola. Where'd the cash go? It went through 3 clearinghouses in Chicago, Nola said, her eyes wide. Then it hit a private account registered to an offshore betting syndicate. Rory had a massive margin debt with a sportsbook in Ontario. And the rest? I asked. Nola clicked another tab. He booked a flight. Minneapolis to San Jose, Costa Rica, one way. Leaves tomorrow night at 8 p.m. I sat back in the chair, the room spinning slightly. He's running. He's running. Alistair agreed, his face darkening. And he's leaving Verity with the empty condo, the mortgage, and the federal embezzlement charge. She's his fall guy, Dash. He's gonna let her take the rap for the school funds while he drinks margaritas on a beach. I stood up, my coat heavy on my shoulders. She doesn't know. Of course she doesn't, Alistair said. She thinks they're going to Florida. If she knew, she wouldn't have let him take the mortgage. I'm going to call her, I said. Dash, don't, Alistair warned, standing up. Let us handle this. We have enough to pick Rory up at the airport. No, I said, looking him in the eye. She needs to hear it from me. She needs to know exactly what her $35,000 bought her. I walked out to my truck, the heater struggling against the freezing draft coming through the floorboards. I dialed Verity's number. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was smug, dripping with that condescending pity she used when she thought she'd completely outmaneuvered me. Well, look who it is, she said. The famous school embezzler. I'm surprised they let you keep your phone in jail, Dashiell. I'm not in jail, Verity, I said quietly. I'm sitting in my truck. Enjoy it while it lasts, she sneered. Rory's lawyer says the evidence against you is airtight. You're going away for a long time, Dashiell. If you'd just let me sell that mother's ring, maybe I'd have felt bad for you. I want to sign the papers, I said, ignoring the bait. My voice was tired, empty. The divorce and the property transfer. I don't want the condo. Verity, I don't want the car. You can have it all. I just want to sign and be done with you. There was a pause. I could hear the wind howling through the phone on her end. She was at the condo. Really? She said, her voice dropping into a suspicious murmur. You're giving up that easily? I'm 45, Verity. My career is over. I don't have the strength to fight you and Rory. I'll meet you at the Lakeview building. 20 minutes. We sign and I walk away. Fine, she said, a small triumphant laugh escaping her lips. I'll have the papers ready. Don't be late, Dashiell. Rory has a flight to prepare for. I won't be late, I said. The Lakeview high-rise was a concrete and glass needle sticking into the black sky above Lake Superior. The wind was throwing frozen spray off the lake, coating the asphalt in a thick, glass-like sheet of ice. I parked my truck at the curb, the engine sputtering and dying. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My hand was shaking, not from the cold, but from the sheer crushing weight of what was about to happen. Suddenly, my phone on the dashboard lit up. It was a private text from Alistair, an audio file attachment labelled Stream Live 4B. Alistair's team had a directional mic aimed at her living room window from the building opposite. I tapped the screen. The audio started playing, the sound of the wind outside mixing with the crackling static of the transmission. What do you mean? You're packing? Verity's voice was sharp, a high, panicked edge cutting through the static. It's just a precaution, babe. Rory's voice came back, smooth, too calm. The feds are sniffing around the catering accounts. I told you, we need to clear out for a couple of weeks. With 3 suitcases? Verity screamed. And why is the condo deed missing from the drawer, Rory? I went to check the insurance papers and… What is this mortgage document? $200,000. Who is Chicago Clearing? Rory, look at me. Verity, shut up and let me pack. Rory's voice turned cold, the polite charm completely evaporating. You sold the place, she shrieked. You mortgaged our condo. Where is the money, Rory? Where is our savings? My mother is paralyzed because of this money. You bastard, you. There was a loud scuffle, the sound of glass shattering, and then a heavy, hollow thud. I said, "Shut up!" Rory roared. Then a distinct, metallic click echoed through the speaker, the sound of a pistol slide chambering around. "Sit down on the couch, Verity," Rory said, his voice deadly quiet, his breath heavy. "Don't make this messy. I'm leaving, and you're going to sit there and let me." I threw my truck door open, the freezing Duluth wind ripping it from my hand as I lunged out onto the ice. My boots hit the slick pavement of the Lakeview high-rise parking lot, the wind off Lake Superior blasting a wall of ice straight into my face. The cold was brutal, the kind that makes your teeth ache and your lungs burn with every breath. Across the dark street, Alistair Burke's unmarked cruiser sat idling, its headlights switched off. In the shadows of the concrete awning, 3 tactical officers in heavy black gear were moving silently toward the side entrance, their rifles held close to their chests. Alistair stepped out of the darkness of the lobby doors, grabbing my shoulder before I could reach the glass. "We've got the floor surrounded, Dash," Alistair whispered, his breath clouding in the freezing air. "Tactical is moving up the fire stairs." I heard the click over the wire Rory's carrying. "You don't go in there alone." "I have to, Al," I said, my voice dead. "If she sees a badge, she'll do something stupid to protect him. She still thinks they're a team. She needs to see the paperwork. She needs to look at me when her world falls apart." Alistair stared at me for a long second, the blue light from the street lamp catching the deep, tired lines around his eyes. He let go of my arm. "2 minutes, Dash. Then we're kicking the door." I didn't wait. I walked through the lobby, my wet boots squeaking against the polished marble. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like a descent into a tomb. When the doors slid open, the carpeted hallway was dead silent, except for the low, distant groan of the wind rattling the building's massive glass face. Unit 4B was at the end of the hall. The heavy oak door was unlatched, resting a half-inch open. I pushed it with my fingertips. It swung back without a sound. The condo was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the black, churning waves of Lake Superior. Expensive leather sofas, a marble kitchen island, and 3 leather suitcases sitting packed by the door. But the beauty was ruined. A crystal vase was shattered on the floor, its water soaking into the white rug. Near the glass wall, Rory McLean had Verity pinned against the concrete pillar. His face was flushed, his expensive coat thrown on the floor. In his right hand, he held a compact black semi-automatic pistol, the muzzle pressed hard under Verity's chin. Verity was shaking, her eyes wide and bloodshot, tears leaving dirty tracks through her heavy makeup. "I don't have the routing code, Rory," she gasped, her hands clutching at his wrists. "I swear to God." "The school system locked Dashill's account after the audit. I can't transfer the rest." "You're lying, you bitch," Rory snarled, his voice tight, cracking with a frantic, desperate sweat. "You have the emergency backup token on your phone. Give me the PIN. The private lenders are waiting at the terminal in Minneapolis. If I don't have the cash-out transfer cleared before my flight, I'm a dead man." "Rory, please. You said we were going together." "She doesn't have it, Rory," I said, stepping into the room. Rory spun around, his eyes wild, his arm jerking as he pointed the gun straight at my chest. He took a half-step back, pulling Verity with him, using her sallow body as a shield. "Back off, Dash!" he screamed, his knuckles white around the grip. "Back the hell off! I'll put a hole in her, I swear to God! I have nothing left to lose." I didn't move. I kept my hands open, down by my sides. I looked at my wife of 12 years. She was staring at me, her mouth open in a silent, terrified plea. "It's over, Rory," I said quietly. I reached into my coat pocket slowly so he wouldn't twitch, and pulled out the thick stack of financial documents Alistair had given me. I threw them onto the polished hardwood floor. They slid across the slick wood, stopping right at Verity's feet. "What is that?" Verity whispered, her voice trembling. "That's your new condo, Verity," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Rory's trembling hand. "Or what's left of it." "Rory took a $200,000 cash-out mortgage on this place on Tuesday. He forged your digital authorization to clear the title." Verity's head turned slowly, looking down at the papers, then up at Rory's sweating face. "Rory? No, we bought this cash. With Dashiell's savings. He used your savings to buy it, yes," I said, my voice cold as the lake wind. "But then he mortgaged it to pay off his sportsbook debt in Ontario." "The money's already gone, Verity. The Chicago clearinghouse called the loan yesterday. This place is going to be seized by the bank before the week is out." "You're lying," Rory yelled, his gun hand shaking violently. "Shut up, you pathetic bookkeeper! Shut your mouth!" "And there's one more thing," I said. Pulling a single folded slip of paper from my breast pocket, I tossed it toward her. It fluttered down onto the broken crystal of the vase. "That's his travel itinerary. A one-way ticket from Minneapolis to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departs tomorrow night at 8 p.m. I looked straight at Verity. "There's only one name on that ticket, Verity, and it isn't yours." Verity stared at the paper on the floor. I watched her face change. The denial, the desperate hope she'd clung to for months, all of it evaporated in a single second, leaving behind only the cold, raw horror of the truth. "Costa Rica," she whispered, her eyes blank. You were leaving me." "Verity, babe, listen to me," Rory stammered, his smooth, charming mask completely shattered now. "It was just a backup plan. I was going to send for you. I had to clear the heat first." "You monster!" The scream didn't sound human. It was a raw, primal shriek of pure, unadulterated rage. Verity didn't care about the gun. She didn't care about her own life. She lunged forward, her fingers curling into claws as she slammed into Rory's face, her nails tearing deep gouges across his eyes and cheeks. "You stole my mother's life. You ruined me," she screamed, clawing at his throat. Rory let out a sharp cry of pain, his head jerking back as blood began to stream down his face. He stumbled over the edge of the leather sofa, his arms swinging wildly. The gun went off. A deafening crack shattered the quiet of the room, the bullet punching a clean, smoking hole through the double-pane window behind them. The glass spiderwebbed, the freezing wind instantly roaring into the apartment, blowing the papers across the floor. But the gun had flown from his hand. It clattered against the hardwood, sliding straight toward my boots. I stepped on it, hard pinning the cold metal under the thick rubber sole of my work boot, right as the door of the apartment was kicked off its hinges. "Federal agents! Down on the floor! Now!" Alistair's voice boomed through the howling wind. 3 tactical officers swarmed the room, their heavy boots slamming Rory and Verity into the floorboards. Rory didn't fight. He lay in the broken glass, sobbing, his hands cuffed behind his back. Verity was pinned next to him. She didn't look at the police. She didn't look at the gun. She just turned her face toward me, her cheek pressed against the cold wood, her eyes wide, begging. "Dashiell, please," she sobbed. "I'm sorry. Please." I didn't say a word. I turned my back on her, stepped over the threshold, and walked out into the cold Duluth night. The state cleared my name. The metadata from the temporary app data files proved that Verity had forged the approvals from our home router while I was 60 miles away. My 15 years of spotless records at Pinecrest remained clean. But there was no victory in it. The 6-hour delay in Maeve Harlow's surgery was too much. The damage to her spinal cord was done. She is permanently paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a motorized wheelchair for the rest of her days. I'll never forget the afternoon we brought her home from the rehabilitation center. Gideon, his strong welder's hands shaking, sat by her bedside in the small, drafty apartment we'd rented near the clinic. He looked up at me, his eyes wet, and took my hand in his. "She's not our daughter anymore, Dash," Gideon said, his voice cracking with a sorrow that broke my heart. "We have no daughter. You're the only child we have left. I sold our house. I sold everything I owned to pay off the private lenders and clear the civil liabilities, making sure Sloane and the family wouldn't have their lives destroyed by Verity's debts. Now, I live in a tiny, one-bedroom apartment over a diesel repair shop near the shipyards. It's loud, it smells of grease and exhaust, and my knuckles ache when the Duluth winter rolls in. But every evening, I walk down to Gideon and Maeve's place, and I help her with her exercises. If this painful journey has taught me anything, it's this: the hardest thing a man will ever have to do is let go of a beautiful lie. Sometimes, we want so badly to believe in the people we love that we ignore the rot growing right under our feet. But a house built on sand will always fall, and when it does, the only thing you have left to pull out of the wreckage is your own dignity. I want to thank every single one of you from the bottom of my heart for standing with me, for listening to my story, and for reminding me that there is still decency in this world. If you believe that a man's honor and the truth are worth fighting for, please hit that subscribe button, share this video, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were standing in my boots? Take care of yourselves, stay warm, and I'll see you in the next story.